Welcome to the Clique podcast. I'm Dani Watson, a mindset and manifestation expert and founder of the Clique, a company that helps women overcome their fears and limiting beliefs to create a life and business that they love. Within this podcast, I will help you get clear on what you want, identify the blocks that are holding you back, transform your mindset and raise your vibration so that you can co-create magic with the universe. If you are looking to design a life that truly sets your soul on fire and manifest more success and abundance, then you are in the right place.
Guys, I just had the best conversation with another powerhouse woman that I'm so excited and overjoyed to be bringing you to the podcast. Dani Watson is the founder of The Clique, which provides ICF accredited coach training and courses that are empowering women to create their success story in the coaching industry. She's also the founder of She Leads, feminine leadership coaching and certification to help women redefine how they succeed, lead, and make money. She's also a published author. She's also the host of the Clique podcast. She holds so many titles, but her most expansive one is being a mother to her children. We talked all about feminine leadership today and worthiness, and I know this conversation is going to be one that so many of you need to hear. I feel like Dani is this woman who's just doing it differently. She came from the corporate world. You're going to learn a little bit about her background and how she got into feminine leadership and how she's building a sustainable coaching business for herself, for her family, and leading with a feminine edge. So without further ado, here is Dani Watson. I hope you enjoyed today's episode as much as I enjoyed having it with her.
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be able to be on your show, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, Dani, listen, I knew that as soon as I kind of found you and started to just learn a little bit more about what you're doing in your world, I knew I really wanted to have you on the podcast. This is an empowerment podcast. You're doing a lot of empowerment work in your business and in your daily life. And I haven't had anybody discuss the topic of feminine leadership. And I know that you are going to be so well versed and just a beautiful, calming presence to our audience and to this podcast overall. So just welcome to the show. I'm so grateful to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and excited to talk more about feminine leadership.
Absolutely. So I know I found you, I think just about 6 months ago. If no one has heard about you, please just share how you started to get onto your journey, how you started to embrace feminine leadership principles in your work and your personal life, and what that really looks like on your day-to-day.
Yeah, great question. Well, I think for me, it was really an alien concept. So let's kind of take it back to the beginning when I first stepped into the world of entrepreneurship. And I'd come from a corporate background, which was very much, hustle hard mentality. So I initially trained as a lawyer. So I was working in the corporate world where everyone were working hard and staying late in the office as a badge of honor. So this was very much all I'd ever seen. And a part of me wanting to start my own business was because I was craving a different pace of life. I could see people that were really at the top of their game succeeding, but I looked at all of the sacrifices that they had to make to get there, and they just didn't seem happy, especially the women. And I saw a lot of incredible women drop out of the corporate space because they felt like they just couldn't keep up with the demands that were putting on them, especially women that had gone on to create families and become mothers. And I saw that and I thought, well, this is ultimately where I'm heading for in my career. I want to be super successful. I want to, really be good at what I do. I want to get paid well, but I don't see myself in that role where I've just sacrificed all of my life to get there. So I kind of had got this myself to a place in my career where I just felt incredibly lost because I started to question everything that I knew. I'd always gone the safe route, climbing that corporate career ladder, going to university to get there. And all of a sudden I was thinking, well, this isn't what I really want, but I did not know what I wanted as an alternative. And I think a lot of people find themselves in this space. So I started to explore different avenues and I started to look into coaching mainly as a way to kind of help me and to figure out what I wanted, what my values are, and to really start working on my own mindset as well. And it was through working with a coach that I discovered coaching. And I thought straight away, this feels like what I'm meant to be doing. So to fast forward the story a little bit, I started my own coaching business. And, for me, it was about doing something more purposeful, more meaningful, but also to be able to escape that corporate rat race.
Mm-hmm.
Now, fast forward a year into my business, and I realized I'd very quickly found myself back into the same patterns of stress, burnout, hustling super hard. And there was nobody putting this pressure on myself. I no longer had a boss that was telling me what to do. This was all coming from me. Mm-hmm. And the thing was, I'd seen a really great amount of success in my first 12 months, but it almost felt like I'd hit this milestone. And I thought, can I really sustain this? I kind of don't even feel like I want to keep kind of moving towards the next goal because this doesn't feel sustainable to me. So it was at this point I started to realize, like, if I want to continue with my business and continue to see the success that I want for myself and also for the clients that I'm working with, I need to start redefining how I succeed, how I lead others, and how I make my money. And so I started to kind of dig more into, personal development just for my own journey. And that's what led me to the work of the feminine and the masculine energy. And it was completely new territory for me. But as soon as I started to dive into what it means to be in our feminine and how naturally we are meant to not always kind of be on 24/7. We're meant to be more present and focus on who we're being rather than always focus on what we're doing. A lot of things started to make sense for me. And I realized for so long myself and many of other incredible women I saw within the corporate place were really too much into their masculine. So I started to dig into this relationship between the feminine and the masculine. And I realized that it isn't about solely being in the feminine. It's not an either or thing. It's about finding our sweet spot between the masculine and feminine so that we can actually create success in a way that feels really good, that really is able to prioritize our own energetic needs, where we're able to honor our own boundaries, where we're able to get support, where we don't feel like we're in this constant like hustle mode mentality where we're competing and we're forcing for things. Success gets to be this really beautiful, almost easy thing where it feels joyful versus the masculine, which kind of tells us that we need to get to our goals no matter what the cost. So for me, it was starting to play around between, the masculine and feminine and figuring out what my own unique sweet spot is. So over sort of the next few years that followed that, it was really kind of a journey of self-discovery. And I knew very quickly that I wanted this to be a part of my work. But like with anything I do, I'm very much of the opinion that I want to get to experience it for myself first without necessarily being in a rush to kind of support others with this. Yeah. And so for me, it was really figuring out, okay, well, what does being in my feminine mean for me? How is this going to support me? And almost kind of being a guinea pig for this work and coming out the other side and realizing, actually, this is really powerful. It's something that's not being spoken about enough. And I think this can be make the real difference between the women who are incredibly capable, but perhaps tap out before they are able to see what they're really capable of, not because they're not good enough or their business model isn't good enough, but because they are operating too much from the masculine and not in that energetic alignment. So really a big part of the work that I do now is really teaching women how to embrace their feminine energy more so that they can succeed, lead, make money in a way that feels really, really good.
I think y'all can gather that this is going to be a really juicy conversation because so many women will resonate with the masculine. I am one of them. I can be very much attuned in my nervous system to be more in the masculine energy. I love what you said about focus on the who versus the do. And I think that's so challenging for so many of us for a variety of reasons. I think conditioning is definitely a part of it, but these types of conversations really just put a normal language to what women feel and how we're operating inside of the patriarchy and how we can sort of start to step outside of that and really get clear, as Dani said, on the sustainability of our businesses, because I think there is some healthy back and forth between masculine and feminine energy, most of us really know the difference between like what masculine feels like, but feminine seems to be a bit more foreign. So I would love for you to unpack, you know, the masculine versus feminine energy in terms of leadership and the characteristics of a feminine leader. Like, what is the avatar? What does she look like? How does she move? How does she speak? How does she think, Dani?
Yes, great question. And I think you're absolutely right. It can feel almost alien for a lot of women to be in their feminine. So a big part for me was being okay with going slow. I love the phrase now, like slow is the new luxury, because in a world that really values pace and doing things at speed, we're often taught that this is the only way to be successful. The idea of slowing down just feels so like luxurious and like just not a thing that we're naturally used to doing with us. So for the feminine leader, she recognized where she is starting to work out of alignment with what feels good to her. And for this is going to be different for everybody. So again, this is finding your own unique sweet spot. So it's being able to slow down and really prioritizing who you're being and how you're feeling before you take any kind of action versus, okay, I've got a to-do list. I've got this goal that I'm reaching towards. I just got to soldier on and get on with it, no matter what the cost. And of course, action plays a key role here, but often we take that action from a place of fear, panic, almost desperation. And we're not necessarily in tune with how our body is feeling. So a good example of this is when you've got a deadline for something and you're tense and you're stressed and you can feel it in your body, right? Yeah. Often we know what our body is telling us, yet we allow the mind to take the lead. So being in the feminine is adopting more of a body, heart-centered approach where we're really tuning into what am I feeling in this moment? What is my heart telling me? And allowing our intuition to guide us a little bit more. And that would be the other part of being in our feminine is really trusting ourselves. Our intuition, especially as a woman, is our superpower. Yet often we hand over our power to external guidance. So maybe it's relying too much on an expert to tell us what to do, or we're taking direction from a boss and we don't question things. And sometimes we have that sort of niggle of, okay, this isn't right for me, or this isn't necessarily what I should be doing, or what I feel like I want to be doing, yet we just continue with something regardless. Being in our feminine is self-trust. It's about being able to really give space to our intuition, and rather than just discard it, really kind of lean into that a little bit more. And that can sometimes feel quite scary because we're often just not used to like allowing our intuition, like our logical mind starts to take over. So a good example of this is that maybe you've got sort of something that you're working on and logically everything's saying you should go with X, but something within you is saying, no, you should go in completely the opposite direction. Like, can you trust yourself in that moment to kind of go with what your intuition is saying rather than, the logical mind taking over? Another big part of the feminine leader is her ability to actually accept support. Now, I think for me, this has been a real kind of challenge because I was a bit of a control freak. Again, like a very much a quality of somebody who's too much in their masculine, where they try to control the outcome. They try to perhaps micromanage everything because they're very much wanting things to look a certain way. Whereas the feminine leader allows for things to go with the flow a little bit more, is able to surrender that control. And a big part of this is perhaps bringing on, say, for example, team members or people that can support you within your business or within your career, and allowing them to be your guide and to kind of lean on people a little bit more rather than being, I'm this super independent boss woman who's got this figured out and tries to perhaps figure it all out. Just because we can figure it all out doesn't necessarily mean that we should. So these are just some of the qualities of feminine leadership. But yeah, as I said, it's not this either or thing, because there's parts of the masculine that are really valid and important as well. So for example, that ability to kind of be resilient and just kind of knuckle down when challenges arise, like there's going to be times, especially in business, where that will benefit you. The ability to take massive action, I think, can sometimes be, more of a masculine quality, but it's making sure that when you are perhaps in your masculine a little bit more, it's not to the point of exhaustion, it's not to the point of burnout, and it's still kind of feeling good for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's really, really huge for women to be able to accept help. That's the thing that stood out the most to me as you were speaking, is like the
Mm-hmm.
delegation portion and wanting things to be perfection is really not sustainable. Although I think there's points to do it and points to not do it. Like, what mountains are you willing to die on? Like, does the email have to be
Yeah.
so perfect? Does the branding, like, you have to be in consideration of what
Yeah.
perfection mountain you're going to die on and which ones you're going to feel
Mm-hmm.
good delegating. I think that women, when we start businesses, definitely we start smaller, and then as we scale, we almost feel a little nervous for that scale to come in, because it's more overhead, it's more responsibility, it's more people to manage, it's more things to consider. But we don't necessarily have to hold ourselves back from the next step by
Mm-hmm.
not getting the help that is required to sustain a successful, beautiful business model in whatever way is described and defined by you. So I think that's super important. You touched on how this was a very challenging component for you, accepting the help.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know that feminine leadership is going to be quite different than our more traditional and I would say stereotypical leadership styles. But what does the impact of feminine leadership have on your team and your organization for the success that you reach?
Yes, really great question. Well, I think initially just the fact that there is a team for me, that was really a shift into my feminine, because I realized that I was addicted to solving problems, you know, almost addicted to stress. I used to say that stress was my emotional home, because when I was fixing problems, I was a little bit stressed, and I kind of thrived under that stress and pressure because I'd been so conditioned that that equaled success.
Yeah.
The more stress and pressure you put yourself under, being in that masculine, the more success I was going to see. Whereas when I started to bring on team members and I finally let that happen, I was like, oh, well, actually, what am I doing with my day? Because I've taken all of these things off my plate. I don't have to think about them anymore. But then, as we often will self-sabotage in these moments when things become easy, because for me, this was totally different to how I'd operated. My day wasn't so full anymore. And, I started to feel uncomfortable with the amount of space that I'd created in my day. So that's when the micromanaging started to kick in, where I was looking at what my team were doing, and then I was kind of changing things or making lots of suggestions. And it was a real struggle for me to just let people kind of get on with it.
Yeah.
But something that is kind of a big sort of, I guess, philosophy behind how we all work within my company is, again, making sure that when we're doing things, we're able to kind of lean on each other for support. But it's always coming back to, is this feeling good? Like, how does this feel within our bodies? Like, and, for my team members, it's being compassionate with them, that they also, if I'm, going to be supporting feminine leadership, I have to make sure that the women around me are also feeling comfortable to be in their feminine as well, and not putting these unrealistic expectations and pressures on my team to perform. Because actually, I found that releasing that pressure from them actually helps them to perform much, much better. Which, when I think back to the corporate world, I'm like, wow, like there's so much pressure for like hitting targets and, like deadlines and specific numbers, like generating certain amounts of revenue. And actually, I feel like that doesn't necessarily get the best out of people. And I think sometimes when we ease a bit of that pressure off people, especially the time associated pressure, people perform a lot better, and what they're creating is much more impactful. And I know that myself and my team have been able to have a much better impact with the work that we're doing by being in our feminine more.
Yeah, something just came to my mind as you're speaking about this, because the numbers seem to be such a masculine fixation. The numbers, the deadlines, the things that need to get done. Whereas I've personally found leading, and we just did this recently, we introduced a new product into our clinic, and we had to meet a certain quota by the end of June, and which is fine. But in my mind, I was like, that can feel like a lot of pressure for the team to do. However, I think the way that you speak life into your team. So for my example, I literally just was like, that's totally easy. That's going to be fine. Like, I'm not worried about it at all. I think your level of comfort as the leader, and when you detach yourself from some of the outcomes that you are working towards in your business, can have a profound impact on how your team and the people within your organization seem to perform to get to said target or to change something. Or have you noticed that in your own team, Dani?
Absolutely. And I think the thing is, like, it's important to have goals, right? It's important to have targets,
Of
but it's
course.
also having an element of playfulness and lightness about it, where it's, we're a huge advocate of the law of attraction within the company. And it's this, okay, like, I'm putting this out there. This is what we want to accomplish. Let's just see how much fun we can have in getting there, and know that we can do as much as we can do. But equally, the universe is going to show up and it's going to play its part in the process. So it's this co-creation where we sort of take one step, and the universe, when we are walking in alignment and we're being true to ourselves and we're doing things in a really fun, beautiful, creative way, the universe is going to show up, and it's also going to support us in that goal as well. So that as well kind of takes that responsibility off. And we kind of always look at goals and deadlines and things that we're doing as, these are not like set in stone, like we've got to get there or else it's a failure. It's also thinking, well, like, look, let's put out this ridiculous goal, see what happens. If it doesn't work out how we want, like, it's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. And let's see if we can have some fun, like coming up with solutions as to what we can do better next time. So for me, it's really looking at business at this constant evolution where we're progressively going over time, and we're going up and we're going down, and we're just enjoying the ride, rather than like, this is what we've got to be making by Q1. And if we don't get there, like, everybody's getting fired. Like,
Yeah.
that's no fun
Yeah.
for anybody. So
Totally.
it's just bringing this bit of lightness into business. Like, it's supposed to be fun, right? It's not supposed to be like this big, heavy thing, like constantly on you. And this is really what's going to create sustainability in your business, because if it's always fun, even if, you're not always hitting your goals, if you can celebrate the moments that you're losing as much as when you're winning, I think that's really the key to success, long-term success.
Yeah, enjoying the journey. So with
Mm-hmm.
detachment, I think that kind of a collective, maybe considerable topic is the aspect of self-worth and worthiness
Mm-hmm.
inside of feminine leadership. And inside of masculine leadership, there's a lot of productivity emphasis. So
Yeah.
how do you recommend and how do you teach your clients, and even in your own journey, like, how can we detach ourselves from our worth versus our productivity, and really not
Mm-hmm.
having those two things be in the same equation?
Yeah, really great question. And I think this, for most people, will actually go further back than just, oh, I was in a job where I had to be in my masculine. For most of us, it goes back to our childhoods, where most of our subconscious beliefs are formed. And, typically it's going to come from being rewarded for, working hard. So this was very much my narrative, where I loved school, I loved learning, and this was how I got praised from my parents, specifically my mom. If I did well at a test, it's like, I could not wait to get home at the end of the school day to go home and tell her, because I knew that that would please her. And so it was this kind of, acknowledgement that I was getting, which ultimately as a child, we take this to mean love, acceptance, validation. So this cycle started from a very young age, and then was reinforced from, teachers and going to university, and then in the corporate world, where this message is like, the harder you work, the more productive you are, the more you're going to get praise, the more you're going to be accepted. And ultimately, what that really comes down to, the more that you're going to be loved. And what humans crave more than anything is to be loved and accepted.
Mhm.
So it's really about going into the pattern at the root cause. So examining, like, what kind of narrative was forming in those early years from my parents or my primary caregivers, that was causing me to attach my productivity, my working hard, to my sense of self-worth. A big challenge for me was when I made the conscious decision that I don't want to be constantly productive. I don't want to feel like, the only way for me to feel worthy of success is if I'm working hard or if I struggled.
Yeah.
So when I started to shift into my feminine and allow things to be easy and, for example, bringing on team members. So I all of a sudden, wasn't having to do all the day-to-day running. I had a lot more free time. I could go at a slower pace. I started to really question like my worthiness of being successful as a business owner, my worthiness to, grow my business, because it was almost like, well, if I'm no longer working hard, like what is there to prove myself worthy of this success that I want my business to see? And it was almost like I couldn't be happy with success unless there was that working hard piece. And so the working hard, it was not just, a belief system. It was really just a part of my identity. So identity work for me came really sort of into play when it came to releasing my worthiness from productivity, but going back to the root cause and looking at that pattern of, the parent-child relationship, things like inner child work, reparenting myself, and really starting to recognize myself as innately worthy. So when we think about, the baby that's, newly born, she doesn't have to do anything to prove herself. She is loved unconditionally as she is. And so it's really starting to build that unconditional love. Another big part of this for me was starting to really focus on that unconditional love for others. So how we love ourselves is often a reflection of how we're able to love others. And so really, for me, becoming a mother, I think was a real big learning lesson for me, because it was probably the first time I truly felt that unconditional love, where I'm like, I'm going to love this person no matter what, what they do. That mother's love, that was that first kind of experience. And I think that for me was a big lesson for me, learning how to unconditionally love myself as well. So whenever I started to feel that dialogue come in where it's like, oh, okay, well, you're not doing this, or you're not being productive enough, or you don't really work hard enough, so do you really deserve that? As soon as I had that narrative kick in, I'd start to ask myself, would I be saying this to my daughter? Would I say to my daughter, I will only love you if you are proving yourself through hard work? So I was able to kind of create this relationship, unconditional love with my kids, and that then was be able to mirror back into the relationship that I had with myself.
I think it's really important to say too that this work of worthiness, in my opinion, is ongoing. Like, I think it's this collective aspect of your being that potentially, like, you think you are undeserving of it. But I just got finished reading a book called Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's so fantastic for any human who is maybe just struggling or wanting to unpack more of that inner dialogue. But in her book, she states something along the line of, you don't get what you want in life. You get in life what you think you're deserving of receiving. And I think it's just, it kind of hit me in my heart center of like, holy smokes. Like, so if I don't believe that I can get there, or I have the ability to form that type of success, or that I'm deserving of said, whatever dream I'm thinking, then it won't happen. And I think that it's so important to recognize where you've been, how far you've come, your upbringing as a child, and some of the things that you've been challenged in your life with, and understand that this work is never done. It's always ongoing.
Absolutely true. And I feel like whenever you are going through some sort of up level, whether it's in a business, whether it's changing the relationship, whether it's, financially you're working towards the next goal, like every level brings a new devil. And I find that this is where I have to come back and I have to revisit the worthiness. So yeah, you're absolutely right. It's ongoing and it's not always linear as well. So I will definitely have moments where I feel like, oh my God, I've got this. Like, I'm totally backing myself. I feel worthy of everything. And then like a week later, something will happen and it's like I've gone back 10 steps. So it's kind of this like constant up and down, which makes it sound like it's really exhausting. But I think that's almost kind of a part of life as well. It's being able to navigate the ups and downs. And, we come out of one sort of, I guess, stumble, and it propels us into our next chapter where we're even stronger, even more confident, have even more self-belief. So yeah, it's a process for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think each chapter prepares you for the next one, and you can't really rush that work. You can't try to force your way through it. And that's really, I think, where stagnation happens and frustration happens. You talked a little bit earlier in the episode about self-sabotage, and I actually really enjoy the topic of self-sabotage because it forces a person to consciously consider where they potentially are sabotaging their own success or their own wealth and their own wellness. What are some really common patterns of self-sabotage you've recognized, maybe in yourself, in your clients, and how can a person begin to recognize them and then overcome them, surely but slowly?
Yeah. Well, I think a big one for me has been emotional avoidance, which when it comes to a pattern of self-sabotage will typically look like doing things that will avoid me feeling what it is that I'm feeling. And I realized that being in my masculine, a part of that was really suppressing my emotions. The masculine says, like, to be emotional or to be vulnerable is a negative thing, corporate world. I remember being in a meeting once and somebody who I really looked up to, a woman in the meeting, there was somebody that was not being that nice to her in terms of how they were speaking, and they were being very aggressive in their approach. And she started crying. And the repercussions of that, of her being emotional and being vulnerable, were really not welcomed. And she kind of got told off for saying, you should have had it more together. So it's kind of this kind of narrative that we can't be emotional to be successful, to be, a powerful, strong leader. So for me, I had practiced emotional avoidance. And typically what that looked like was doing anything that I could to distract myself from feeling what I was feeling. So it would be numbing myself through either binge watching Netflix series. It might be through drinking. There was one point where I had a real issue with online shopping. And it was almost like I was using these distraction tactics as a way to avoid what it was that I was truly feeling. And so self-sabotage, what we're normally doing is we're normally creating these patterns which don't serve us as a way to avoid something else that we think is going to be even more painful. Another way that I really see it show up is self-sabotage when women are just about to see an incredible amount of success. So it might be that things are going incredibly well within a business, and for whatever reason, they'll start to do things that kind of compromise the success track that they were on. So I had a client once that just, it was like about to be a launch, and I've actually done something similar within my own business as well. So it resonated me, and I always remember this client because it was so sort of similar to a similar story that I'd had, where she was preparing for a launch and she started like messing around with some of her CRM system, like changing things. And I'm not sure what happened, but on the tech side of things, everything just basically fell apart literally a day before her launch. So she put in all of this incredible work and energy and was so excited for this launch and was just about to see this incredible launch, like the fruits of her labor, and then kind of self-sabotaged right at the last minute. So when we see this, what this often ties back to is a fear of success, a fear of what that incredible amount of success could potentially come with. And that fear can maybe tied into different things for different people. So maybe it's a fear of responsibility. Maybe it's coming back to the not feeling deserving of it. So it's like, I'm going to avoid success no matter what the cost, because I don't deep down feel like I'm worthy or deserving of that success. Maybe it's a fear of judgment. If I'm really successful, what will other people think of me? So yeah, another common pattern is self-sabotage, which I find so interesting because I think on a surface level, everyone's like, well, of course I want to be successful. But when we start really digging into that and pulling things apart, actually there's a lot of resistance to being that successful leader, that successful businesswoman. So yeah.
Well, I think you have to take a lot of responsibility inside of whatever business model you've created to become that type of leader, to become the type of person who would, of course, have that level of success. And it's so interesting as women, because if we see it in a man, and this is not picking on the men, but if we see it in a man, it's almost just like, oh, of course, that makes sense. But when we are seeing it for ourselves or for our sisters, I think it's almost easier to see it for other people versus yourself. And the emotional avoidance aspect, one of the things that I'm doing right now, it's so interesting that you bring this up, Dani, because emotional avoidance, you said, like either with consuming goods or food or alcohol or Netflix or some of these outlets that our body just starts to get attuned to, and we learn over time as this coping mechanism, this numbing mechanism. I'm fasting from some specific things in my life right now. And it's so interesting. My psychology will come and be like, well, I want this. And it's like, but wait, why do you want it? What are you not unpacking? What are you trying to avoid? Or is this just a moment in your day where you're feeling overwhelmed and overstimulated by your children? Right? I think there's so many different aspects of self-sabotage and so many layers of it. And we often get really frustrated, and oftentimes we can give up on our dreams inside of that. So in your opinion, why do women give up? Why would we give this a shot? And then why do some women sort of give up on their dreams and their hopes and their goals inside of this work?
Yeah, great question. I think actually one thing you just mentioned, the overwhelm, I'd say from the women that I've seen that are incredibly, capable, smart women that have everything to play for, often they get themselves overwhelmed with, I guess, kind of perhaps the way in which they're thinking about business. But when we kind of dig into that overwhelm, there's kind of more stuff going on below the surface. So overwhelm might be, the perfectionism tendencies, right? Where they have a project that they're working on and they are so busy trying to make it this perfect thing that it's overwhelming them to the point that they don't actually launch anything at all. So I see this happen a lot with the coaches that we train, where they'll perhaps be creating a program or creating maybe, I don't know, posts for social media. And they'll put so much energy into this, but that perfectionism mind keeps saying to them, this isn't good enough. And so it's that inability to just get something done. Like they get so overwhelmed that they think, it almost then puts them into that freeze state where they don't do anything at all. They'll put it to one side and then they'll get distracted with their distraction tactics. So that's when they start maybe, sliding off the bandwagon. So maybe one day they've got this really great routine and it's that kind of quiet quitting almost. It's not that, big declaration of, okay, I'm going to quit my business. Like very rarely actually do I see that. It's more of the pattern of quiet quitting where it's this gradual process over time where maybe they have a bad day and then that bad day turns into a bad week. And, slowly over time, they start to do less and less within their business to the point where they're like, do I even have a business anymore? Now, there'll be some women that come back to it. Maybe they take sort of 6 months, a year off and they'll come back to it. And that's fine. Sometimes people need to have that period of reset, but it makes me sad when I see the women that don't come back to it at all. So it's kind of encouraging women to remember why they started, but that overwhelm, I think, first of all, it's recognizing that one bad day doesn't need to turn into a bad week. Any opportunity, we can press the reset button. And it could have been a terrible day yesterday. Today is a brand new day. But it's also just doing less, putting less expectation on ourselves and just taking each day as it comes. I think the problem sometimes is when we've got really, really big goals, it can feel like there's so much that we need to do to get there. And it's not to say that we shouldn't have those big goals, but it's breaking it down into something that is a little bit more manageable, that doesn't feel so overwhelming. It's not going to send our nervous system into, shock and overdrive. That's what's happening. Our nervous system just freaks out, says, I can't handle this. And then it's that sort of pattern then of slowly, quietly quitting. Whereas if we can learn to start doing things at a bit more of a perhaps slower pace, and something I want to point out here, which I think is super important, is the pace in which you move as a business owner does not dictate the success you are able to see. I think there's this false misconception that the faster you go, the more successful you are. And I don't know, sometimes I think I look at my journey, I think, well, yes, things have happened quite quickly. But equally, there's some things that I've really taken my time on. And I think that those have been the projects that I think have really kind of taken off in a big way. So it's allowing yourself to perhaps go a little bit slower and, not have this insane amount of pressure that you're putting on yourself and, figuring things out as you go a little bit more and allowing that, taking one step and allowing the path to become clearer rather than being so fixated on this end goal. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. The pace in which you move doesn't determine your success as a business owner. I mean, that definitely hits right in the heart, and just a great way to think about it differently, because I think that we get so, and I'm notorious for this, is like, I'm thinking like 10 months ahead, 10 years
Yeah.
ahead. Like, and I think that that can honestly to goodness stagnate me in some ways and make me feel frustrated with the here and now, where actually being present inside of the productivity, being present inside of what you're doing in this moment is enough, and it's more than enough, and you still have time. And I know we can get caught up in wondering, you know, well, when and when and when, but it's, I think, grounding into who you're becoming on this journey, and that is more important than the how and the when, at least in my own experience.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because I think you're ultimately, and I've had this in my journey where I've had these huge milestones that I've hit within my business where I'm like, this is what I've manifested. This is what I really want. And I'll celebrate for a short while. And then afterwards, I felt flat. And I'm like,
Mhm.
what is this? Like, why is this celebration so short-lived? And I think it was those times where I was so fixated on getting to the goal, no matter what the cost, that it was almost this kind of like, oh my God, I've got here now, but what next? And it was that almost dread of the what next. Whereas if you can get to success and get to your milestones, maybe it is at a slow pace, but you absolutely love every step of the process and that journey. You know, you're here for the ride and the thrill of it, not just to get to that goal. You'll get to the goal and you'll be like, right, I'm ready for more.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's just again like allowing that kind of space to kind of create in a way that feels really good.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. You shared a recent social media post that said that the waiting game is not a burden. I
Mm-hmm.
love it. Like it was so good when I read it. I was like, yes, that's for me. Can you unpack that a little? Like, why do we feel discomfort in the waiting for the goal, the waiting for our dreams, the waiting for whatever desire, whatever success, or whatever we're trying to bring forth in our daily reality?
Mm-hmm. I think the thing is, like, it's human nature to want to progress. And I think when we're in this space of entrepreneurship or having sort of big goals for our life, it's like we get so fixated on that. But this whole idea of like the waiting game is actually there, you know, it's happening for you, and it's really actually this huge gift that we have. It's not just about like I've got to push through this as quickly as possible. For me, my biggest moments of growth have happened in the times when it felt like not a lot was happening at all. And it's for me, it's really been that ability to surrender and trust in a higher power and trust that everything is going to happen at exactly the moment that it is meant to happen. I
Mm-hmm.
think the problem is that so many of us are waiting for this elusive moment when we're saying, this will be when I'm happy, like when I've got the dream house, when I have these conditions met, this is when I will be happy. And they don't realize that to get to that place, you have to feel the happiness of what you want right now.
Yeah.
So I sometimes, like, I had a real, when I was speaking earlier about this kind of moment where I'd hit this huge financial goal and I felt flat. When I started to dig into this a little bit more, I was like, okay, when have I felt my most happiest? Like, if I can think of like that to the moment when I felt the most excited, the most like in, you know, in alignment. And I actually kind of, one of those moments was actually right at the beginning of my journey where it almost felt like I had everything to play for. But at that moment in time, I really had nothing. You know, I was living in a flat with far too many people. I was, you know, really in quite a significant amount of debt. I was struggling quite badly with anxiety. And, you know, I didn't have a lot, like my conditions were less than ideal, but I was very good at using my imagination to really think about the things that I want to the point where I was actually feeling as if I had those things within my possession. So I could get myself to this place of really high vibration, of feeling amazing, feeling good, without necessarily having the physical reality. And I think this is a real skill. I think I was quite lucky because I've always been super imaginative. As a child, I had like imaginary friends. So I think I can become a product of my imagination very, very easily. But I think this is something, if you can learn to do this, you will learn to enjoy the waiting game a lot more because you will realize there's so much available to you in this moment right now. It may not be physically within your space, but you can take yourself there internally, and that can feel just as good, if not better, than the actual physical reality. In fact, some of the times when I've had the physical reality, I've almost been a bit disillusioned because I'm like, huh, okay, well, you know what, how I was playing this out in my mind was really exciting and this is great. But so yeah, it's sometimes just almost assuming that the physical reality is always better. It can be great, but actually that internal world that you have access to it whenever you want, any moment. You know, take for example, you're in the shower. Can you turn that into a really beautiful spiritual experience where you're connecting with that future vision, where not from a place of I need to have that, I want to have that right now, but from a place of it's already mine. Start reliving, or living rather, your dream life internally and see how that changes for you. And you will start to enjoy the wait a little bit more.
Well, I think there's so much we don't see in the non-physical that because we're human, right? So our
Yeah.
experience is very physically curated, but I couldn't agree more. Like having some type of awareness that there's a grand creator that is there guiding and supporting the journey, and also just tapping into that emotional frequency and that vibrational frequency of it's already mine, it's already done, kind of whatever affirmation that might look like. I think too, like pursuing happiness is almost as fleeting as pursuing motivation. Like I'm going to feel happy when, I'm going to feel motivated when. It's like that. It doesn't work like that. I think a better question is like, what are you optimizing for? Like, why are you even doing this in the first place? Because I think when you get grounded into your why and you can actually have a compass as to where you're going on a spiritual, internal, purposefully driven life level, it becomes funner. But I know that we get stuck in the waiting. Like, I mean, we're all guilty of it. I'll raise my hand and say, yes, I've done this a number of
Because we're
times.
always waiting for something, right? We're always, you know, it's human nature to want to progress. So you hit one goal and it's human nature for them to thinking, well, what is the next chapter? So there's always going to be an element of waiting. So it's knowing that it's like, well, how can I make this a fun experience? And I think this, and you'll probably agree with this as well, it's like when you're doing what you love, and you're so consumed by it, you're not looking at the time and being like, okay, well, why isn't my stuff shown up yet? You're too busy just enjoying your work, enjoying living your life. So I think this is where being in our feminine can really help us more, because we're here for the joy of the creation and the joy of the journey and the feeling good and all of that comes with it. So we're not so, oh, well, but this is my goal that I'm trying to get towards. We're a little bit more detached from the goal, I think. So that makes it more enjoyable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think with that feminine leadership, you talked earlier in the episode about defining our relationship with success, and how can we women, tell us how we can meet that feminine leader within, that feminine persona that maybe have been conditioned more in the masculine, or maybe more in self-doubt and self-sabotage. Like, how can we meet her? How can we define that relationship with success for ourselves? And how have you done it in your own life, Dani?
Yeah, good question. I think it's really playing around with finding your sweet spot. So for me, when I first embarked on this journey and I learned about who the feminine leader was, like the qualities that she possesses, I tried to sort of test around with being in my feminine fully. So I let go of all of my structure. I'm a compulsive planner and I like to have structure and routine, and that kind of went out the window. And I thought, I'm going to go with the flow. I'm going to trust my intuition a lot more, and, started to weave in more of these feminine qualities and do less. And I really struggled with that. I found that actually I couldn't get to a place where that felt really, really good for me. But I know women that need to be fully in their feminine for that to kind of feel like an enjoyable experience. So the masculine is not necessarily a bad thing as long as we're approaching it in a really healthy way. So I may typically be more in my masculine than perhaps some other women, but it's knowing where that being in my masculine is slipping into toxic masculinity, where I'm pushing too hard and doing too much and putting too much pressure on myself. So I love taking action, and the way that I distinguish taking action that's very much too much in my masculine versus a healthy balance is asking myself, like checking in, like, how do I feel before I take any action? Like making sure I'm not operating from a place of fear or stress, or I've got to hit my productivity quota. It's coming from a place of like, I really, really want to be able to do this. And I'm going to find joy in doing this. So just being really intentional behind the action that I'm taking. But for me, it's this unique sweet spot. So something that I found that's really helped me is, let's say within my weekly routine, I like to have that structure and routine in place, but then I will create space within my week, which is for let's just see what happens. Let's just see in this moment what I'm feeling called to do. So, trusting myself in that moment to just come up with the right idea, just being playful with it. So it's making sure I'm finding that balance in my structure, and also actually scheduling in time to just be, rather than having a really full week where it's just constantly, meetings or things that I need to be doing. It's actually, okay, I am recognizing that I'm a human being and that takes priority above all else. So I try to, when I'm planning out my week, make sure that that is the main focus, like who I'm being. Am I making sure that I'm prioritizing that first before, all of the doing steps?
Yeah, I love that so much. I think it's like full stop, full permission for women to actually schedule time for themselves in the ways that they know are going to nourish their soul and their spirit and their health and their wellness. Because, let's be honest, if you have kids, if you have a business, stuff's going to schedule. And if you're not prioritizing yourself inside of the life you are building, it's a quick and fast way to burn out. And it's also a quick way to feel that overwhelm and the resentment that we had chatted about earlier. So I love all of that. If someone is, just salivating over this conversation, Dani, how do they work with you? How can they get connected with you in your world?
Yes. Well, in terms of connecting with me, you can find me on Instagram, Dani_Watson_coaching. At the link in my bio, you can find all of the different ways to work with me. So the main ways, so we have a coach training program, which is for new coaches, the Clique Academy, really where we're taking somebody who is relatively new to the coaching space, or maybe they've done some coaching before and have never got any formal qualifications. They get qualified as a coach through our ICF accredited coach training. They also learn other techniques such as neuro-linguistic programming. We cover things like EFT, emotional freedom technique, energy work. So it's really this core foundations of coaching combined with all of these amazing coaching tools and healing modalities that can really help you transform your clients at the highest level. I also run a feminine leadership program, She Leads. So this is either for the woman that is looking for feminine leadership coaching for herself to be taken on that journey to, really redefining how she succeeds, how she leads, how she makes her money. So maybe that's for an entrepreneur or a career woman that's kind of looking to experience that for themselves. Or we also have the She Leads certification. So this is for women who really want to coach within the feminine leadership space. So we've got sort of a load of smaller programs as well, but at the moment they're kind of the core ways in which you can work with me. And again, they can all be found at the link in my bio, Dani_Watson_coaching.
I love it. And we will leave all of her information and the ways in which you can connect with Dani in the show notes. I've absolutely loved and appreciated this conversation. I think it's just like coming at a time in my life where it's a really good reminder and a message that you just kind of need to hear. And I know that for many people listening, it will feel that way for them too. So thank you so much, Dani. Is there any other last words of feminine leadership wisdom that you want to leave with our audience today? Oh
my goodness, great question. I think just that reminder of what makes you innately worthy, like bringing it back to like, what are the things that you possess, the magic within you that is it within you, no matter what you do, no matter how hard you work, no matter how productive you are. You could have a really lazy day. I hate the word lazy, but an easy, fun day where you're really doing nothing. It's recognizing that you could do nothing and all of those qualities are still within you. What makes you worthy is within you, regardless of what you are doing. So yeah, I think just leaving on that message.
I think it's the perfect message to leave on. And it's so true. And I love it. So thank you so much for being on the show today and getting to connect with you. I'm so, so grateful.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so amazing to chat with you and connect. And yeah, I'm just so honored that you invited me here.
Absolutely.
If you are wanting to build your own successful online coaching business, make sure to check out Freedom, Abundance and Impact, our free 10-day business and mindset course for coaches and aspiring coaches. To access, simply head to wearetheclique.com and click free course in the menu.